First, I would like to congratulate the organizing team who has organized such a beautiful seminar, international seminar, and especially technical teams and those who are before the curtain and behind the curtain. And also, a special thanks goes to Shubhra ma'am, who has invited me to chair this session. And once again, I would like to thank to all the participants who have presented their paper and who are going to present their paper. And from the core of my heart, I also welcome all the academicians, research scholars who are with us and who have presented their paper on 20th August and 21st. And this is the last day of this seminar. In this technical session, we already, ma'am, you have told me that there are 5 speakers. First is Lee Chen. If I would like to invite to Lee Chen, please present your paper. Yeah. Has he joined? Lee Chen?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to share my PowerPoint, sorry. Yeah. Sorry. It shows, yeah.
Dr. Malut, I think you were sharing.
Yeah, someone is.
Yes, Dr. Malut, can you stop sharing your screen, please? Ma'am, can you try once again, please?
Still doesn't work. Sorry. Oh.
Ma'am, actually, you are visible on screen. You have shared.
Yeah, I found that. Yeah, can you see that?
Yeah. Now it's
yeah, ma'am.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yes, so thank you, everyone. My topic today is Where Land and Water Meet, a cultural exploration of Australian Aboriginal livelihood in response to environmental changes. And in many countries, contemporary environmental crises such as low rainfall, droughts, bushfires, and floods have impacted not only loss of wild habitats, but also people's livelihoods of agriculture, farming, and fisheries. On 27th March, ABC News reporting that the impending rice shortage in Australia after years of devastating drought could force the country to rely heavily on imports, yet other countries have constrained exports of agricultural products, including rice, to meet their domestic food supply in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Quite a few scholars have suggested that confronting the current environmental crisis, we should learn to live with the land instead of living on it. Along with the view, we should also realize that our knowledge of the natural world is translated and continues constructed by each generation from the land, such as the way that Aborigines passed down their biocultural knowledge. Sorry, I can't find the. Can you see my PowerPoint? Sorry.
Yeah, ma'am. It is this one. It's this one.
Yes, sorry, I can't see that. In modern history, Australian Aboriginals are labeled as primitive hunter-gatherers, although it is still controversial that whether there was any pre-contact economies of agriculture, aquaculture, or animal husbandry in their society. For over 5,000 years, Australia's indigenous communities have demonstrated their astonishing wisdom by natural resource management and land civilization. Through the case studies of Aboriginal livelihoods in crops cultivation and early aquaculture, this study aims to answer the questions. First is, what is the connection between traditional Aboriginal livelihood and their concept of country? And the second is, what is the practical significance of Aboriginal ecological knowledge to our response to contemporary environmental change? About the conceptual framework and analytic approaches, this study is in an environmental context, and it involves a variety of cultural research theories and approaches, including Raymond Williams' anthropologic concept of culture or cultural materialism, which addresses everyday meanings with values, norms, and material or symbolic lives. Also, his concept of livelihood comprises a broader sense of human need and a closer sense of the physical world. My study is also led from other notable works in the field of environmental humanities and ecocultural studies. Based on my previous research on Australian wetland cultures, market vegetable gardening, and aquaculture in Western Australia, the paper reevaluates Aboriginal interpretations of cosmology, particularly the dialogical relationship between human and nature through their ongoing ecologic practices. The findings are proposed to contribute to a humanities-based response to the increasing challenges of environmental change. The study applies the approaches of textual analysis, archival analysis, and discourse analysis to understanding Indigenous views and practice of ecology. The title, Where Land and Water Meet, originates from Rod Giblett in his book, Postmodern Wetlands. His understanding of Aboriginal ecological philosophy underpins my study. The book, Australian Wetland Cultures, presents the importance of wetlands to early Australian Aboriginal societies. Wetland is both a sacred site and the way that Aboriginal ancestors lived. Aboriginal people camped on the swamp margins, hunted and gathered the wetlands wildlife. However, it doesn't mean that Aborigines are only hunter-gatherers. Through environmental practice, they have demonstrated their livelihood strategies and presented their own values of nature. Noongar people who live in the southwestern Australia believe Wagga, a creation being of rainbow serpent, produced the valleys, hills, and wetlands through creating a smooth trail of water bodies above and below the ground. In Western Australia, the water bodies of the Swan coastal plain are the dreaming traces of the Wagga, which determines the shape of country. The Aboriginal idea of country is not a construction, not a discourse, not in the past or in the white man's history, but a natural cultural landscape comprised of water and land in prehistory, in the dreaming, in the past, present, and future. Wagga not only presents a water creative force, it also supplies clean and fresh water for food growing. Wetlands have been the most biologically productive areas of the Swan coastal plain, as they provide a variety of food, medicinal, and manufacturing resources. In this section, I studied two common indigenous crops cultivated by the early Aboriginal people in Australia. Warren, the plant mentioned in this historic text, is yam, which is a staple vegetable for the Aboriginals situated near swamps. On the central coast of Western Australia, people gathered warren roots and reinserted the head of the yams for a future crop. While yam products occupied wetter areas, grain as a stable crop was growing in coastal areas beyond the high rainfall zones. The common grains included barley grass or native millet and oat grass or kangaroo grass. One important grain cultivated and harvested by Aboriginal people was rice. Since 2012, Scholars have discussed the economic and agricultural potentiality of the native rice that has been used by Aborigines for thousands of years. They address its ecological values as some species are able to grow in brackish water. This research may also contribute to the resolutions to current rice shortage in Australia. Another important part in this section is the Aboriginal fire stick farming strategy. The term was first proposed by Jones in 1969. In his understanding, firing the bush can clear forests to create habitats, increase the proportion of solar energy, and generate plant food. He argues that thousands of years before, fires were systematically lit by Aborigines and were an integral part of their economy. Aboriginal wisdom of livelihood is not only demonstrated in land management, but also in their harvesting from the sea. Certain Australian Aboriginal cultures and livelihood have a strong attachment to the coastal environment. Before European explorers arrived, Aboriginal people had successfully developed the instinctive fishing techniques, including aquaculture systems or fish traps, rafts and canoes, and fishing in partnership with dolphins. They harvested more than 150 species, which were varied from one side of the country to the other. However, the entire Australian coast contributed to abalone harvesting. For centuries,
Ma'am, please conclude within 2 minutes. We have 2 minutes.
Sure, no problem. The following parts I just introduced Aboriginal abalone harvesting and pearling. And as a conclusion,
okay, ma'am.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, ma'am, please continue.
Yeah. In Aboriginal language, the term country is both a common noun and a proper noun. Country is a living entity with a yesterday, a today, and tomorrow, with consciousness, action, and a will toward life. In Aboriginal narratives, land and water shapes their deep cultural and spiritual knowledge of country. Country is both a natural and cultural matter, and it forms their traditional livelihood. However, today they are marginalized from the innovative agriculture and aquaculture technologies, even deny access to their inherited land and water. The aim of the study is not to debate whether traditional Aboriginal livelihood had developed agriculture or aquaculture, but to advocate rethinking and refreshing their ecological knowledge and the rekindling custodial responsibilities of our whole human beings. It's a way our ancestors lived. It's a country we should protect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. It was a well-researched paper, and undoubtedly you have just narrated very beautifully. You have explored the Aboriginal Australian livelihoods in agriculture and aquaculture in relation to traditional cosmologies. Undoubtedly, it was a well-researched paper, and the house is open for discussion. Is there any question or suggestion from ma'am? Is there any question? No, I think there is no question because I myself have seen it. Now I would like to invite. Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, you are most welcome. Now I would like to invite Dr. Prasenjit Panda ji. Dr. Prasenjit sir, are you with us? Have you joined?
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
I'm there, sir. I'm here.
Okay, sir. Yeah. You are most welcome. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, sir. Is it audible?
Yeah. You are audible and you are visible, sir. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okay. Should I proceed?
Yeah.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much for giving me a chance to speak on this platform. And My title, the paper of my presentation is the Indigenous Identity, Oral Tradition, and the Land in the Poetry of Parimal Hasda, a Santal poet.
Sir, have you any PPT? Have you any PPT?
No, sir, no, sir.
Okay,
I have got
okay.
only I have got only the oral presentation, and I have some script on that poems. So I'll be describe those things.
Okay.
Okay. The first thing which I came across, in this seminar, on this conference, is the word indigenous. Now, when you are talking about indigenous, that does mean you are making some genre into the periphery. You are not accepting that into the, in the center. So that's a problematic areas nowadays. Now, when you talk about Santali poems, since I'm belonging from that area, I know them well. So the Santal, they are the tribal people. Now, they do not have their voices because their voices are not been learned, their voices not been heard of by the mainstream people, by the mainstream literature even. Because the language they speak, they cannot even write those things. Even they have written something, they will not be read until or unless they are translated into English or probably any established language. Now, this is the problem of the Santali poems. Now, this man, Parimal Hasda, actually written several poems in Santali, but they were not at all famous until unless there was Suvendra Hasda. There's another Santali poet who knows English. He's a doctor by profession in Jharkhand. He actually translated those things, those poems into English, and thereby we can get through those poems, and we can understand that how the people are living there, how their language has been destroyed, how their religion, I'm talking about the religion, because they have got very pagan religion, it's been destroyed, how they are getting the pain of that, how in the name of the welfare scheme, how in the name of a development scheme, how the government is not giving any heed, any attention to them to revive those things. So this is my point of view, and another thing is that if you are this is called an ethnic literature, and we, the mainstream people with the mainstream intellectual, are always talking about the ethnic literature should be coming into the mainstream. But are we giving them chance? Probably not. Until unless they are translated into English or any established language, be it Hindi, be it English. Otherwise, those ethnic language, they are becoming in the periphery, and probably the time will come when they will not be no longer present in that current scenario. So therefore, we should study, we should do research on them, and thereby to understand the Santali language. Now, I'm getting I'm going for some of the poems. You can understand that how the tribal people, how their literature is reflecting their pain in a different way. Now, there's a poem by, there's a poem. The poem starts like this way. The month of Sohrai passed by right before my eyes, but the loud, frenzied beating of tamak, the beating of drums, and the tunes of the trio were not heard. As the sun god conceals himself behind a corner of the earth, a foreboding calm descends everywhere. A gunshot was heard in the distance. After that, a man's voice dying in pain. Now, this poem actually is written on the set of the Naxalite movement. The Naxalite thing is going on before 10 years. It's before 10 years. How the West Bengal people, in the West Bengal the tribal people are suffering from that. Now they are in the mindset. They are always, they are suffocated by the Naxal people. They are also suffocated by the police. And look this, how they are, how they are getting this. How they are crying for their glorious past. From a mahua tree, an owl flew away towards a hill. The earth is curled in fear. And young woman at a well at the end of the street asks, Delena, hurry up, let us return to our houses. Where they will go? They do not have the houses. Because all the jungles, all the environment, the ecology, which were the kingdom of the tribals, they are being taken care of by the government. or probably by the welfare scheme. So where they will go? So the houses here is very much kind of a metaphorical. They don't have their house. You can talk about this, that when you can, to use the Haber's nationalism, when you read that, you can find that to create a kind of a nation, you need to incorporate everyone. It should be coming out from also the periphery and also in the center. If you do not give the periphery a chance to form a government, it will not be a good government. It will not be a good nation. So these tribal people, they make the forest as their home, as their country. And when they come to the city, they say that it's not their country. Probably it's the other country they are coming. So this separation is going. This separation is there, still there, and through their poetry, it is reflecting. Now, I'm just going back another situation of the female at that point of view in the tribal, how the literature is reflecting the pain of the female. Now, the young woman who standing by the road was selling flowers. Why they should go for selling flowers when they had the agriculture, the paddy fields, they have all those things in the jungle? Because they lost their home. That's why they have to come out from the jungle to the street. Today, she herself was turned into a beautiful flower. She's decorated herself. To suck the nectar of her body, like bumblebees buzzing around her, are so many young men. Today, her address is a hidden alley in the market, where to fight her hunger, she has turned her body into a shop. What she has become? She has become a kind of a prostitute. She's selling her body. In Marshada Devi's maximum short story, you can find how the woman turned herself to be a prostitute, how they are selling their body. Here also, this beautiful girl actually is selling her body only to earn some bread. Then, the Hasda actually wrote some of the Sovendra Hasda, who actually wrote another book, a very fine book, Adivasi Will Not Dance, in the protest of our Diden Rashtrapati, the Diden President Pranab Mukherjee. When the Pranab Mukherjee went there in the Jindal Group of Industries to open the Jindal Group of Industries, one power plant, the Adivasi, the tribal, actually they revolted against them. They revolted against the authority, and they say that we are not going to dance in the tune of the government, because you have taken all my land, you have taken all my agriculture field, you have taken my religion, you have taken my culture, you have taken everything, the ecology also. So how the religion they have taken. Now there's another poem, I'm not going to read that one here. They actually is a dwindling between the two things, between the Hindu god and their god. And later on, if you read the other poems, you can find that how the Hindu god is taking the place of their god, because the culture is actually coming. So there is a hegemonic culture is going on in their world, in the tribal world. So their indigenous poetry, their folk tradition, their oral tradition, they are all going to decay and destruction, because nobody going to take care of those things. So here these poems, in these poems, you talk about several other things. Probably the young woman, I'm reading some of the line, the young woman, when she stands in the bus terminus or walks in the midst of people on the footpath, then on the spotting her, those very young men avert their eyes and hide behind the open ends of the saris of the woman. The same people.
Sir, please conclude. Sir, please conclude.
Yes, sir.
Sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So this is how I may conclude my paper by saying that how this indigenous is people, the culture, the religion, and their pain has been described by explained well by Parimal Hasda in his poems, and we should do the research to how to explicate those problems and how to bring them into the mainstream literature, so that their problem will be addressed in a better way. Thank you, sir.
Undoubtedly, sir, it was a very beautiful and insightful paper, and I want to say one thing. I was just listening and seeing you, and I would like to say it seems that you have lived that life. The problems of the tribal which you have shared, I would like to say that you have gone there, you have passed the time in such a beautiful manner. You have presented. That is an overwhelming, sir. A
Oh,
very
so
nice presentation.
oh,
Okay, sir.
thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
Now I would like to invite Dr. Abhijit sir. Dr. Abhijit sir.
Hello.
Yeah. Yeah, sir. Yeah.
I mean, thanks,
Yeah,
Chair.
you are most welcome. Yeah, you are most welcome.
Yeah, yeah. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible, sir. You are audible.
So I shall begin with the title of my paper is Indigeneity in South Asia, a case of the indigenous nationalities mobilization in Nepal. Talking about indigeneity and indigenousness, this concept, is a very legal one. It's like when I was doing my PhD way back, I had to, undergo through a problem whereby the people, the government, when they come to the government officials, and then there's to ask, like, is there any indigenous people in South Asia or Asia? It's a very, like, I'm just saying, they don't exist in those documents, government documents, like we have it. But yes, the concept of self-identification exists. So yes, if certain groups claim themselves to be indigenous, yes, they can go through it. Like, a problem emerges because of the legality concept. Now, I'm talking about, see the case of Nepal. Like, it's the first country in Asia, and so far the only country which has accepted the presence of indigenous people in the constitution. Like, it was the one which ratified ILO Convention 169 in 2007. It has even signed the declaration of the United Nations, the UNDRIP declaration. So, like, so far, yeah, it's still, if you look at the indigeneity in South Asia, yes, it's only Nepal which has accepted, the indigenous people officially and legally and through, signing the ILO Convention 169. But I just want to mention how exactly did this happen? Like, when in India we call someone as Adivasi and, or they as indigenous. How did this mobilization become so successful? I would like to mention a case like how did this movement, for the rights of indigenous people became so powerful in Nepal? UN's role, in 1993, was very important. I mean, like, in 1993, they declared the year as the year for world's indigenous peoples. This gave a kind of impetus for all people across the world to, mobilize on the basis of their indigeneity. Just like in 1993, UN, as the UN operated its role, then the people of Nepal, the ethnic groups in Nepal, they started mobilizing, claiming that we are also indigenous. They came up with a conference in 1994 declaring themselves as indigenous, which the government did not pay much heed. But as the movement became stronger, and with the passage of time, the government was pressurized and they were forced to accept the presence of indigenous people in the country through a constitutional act in 2002. So after 2002, after 5 years of that, the government ratified the ILO Convention 169, which is, of course, a legally binding document. Which is legally the binding document, signing which they are bound to protect the rights of the indigenous people inside the. So, how did this success? If you look at how did it happen? Now, see, the indigenous movement. I mean, if you say, when I mention you as indigeneity, we a kind of global consciousness. We call it a global consciousness, whereby there is a network of different indigenous groups across the world. So, earlier definition, as we mentioned, when we say indigeneity, we normally mean it when we say indigenous people, we normally mean people somewhere from Colombia, Latin America mainly, or Central America, maybe the Incas, or the Aztecs, or the Mayas, or the Toltecs, or those sort of people. Now, indigeneity, or indigenous people is not confined to only Latin America. We have indigenous people in Africa, right? We have indigenous people in a country like Nepal, or in certain other Asian countries where there has been no European colonization. Nepal was never colonized by any European country whatsoever. So here we look indigeneity from a different concept. Now, as till today, there has been no proper definition of indigenous people. Not proper definition in the sense, a definition which has not been accepted, or applicable for all groups. So rather, it believes on self-identification. The issue of self-identification comes in, and that's why it has nothing to do with European colonization. But there is a debate going on now. I want to bring the debate. Like, for example, when we say indigenous in India, is there any indigenous people in India? Yes, there is. But okay, the government looked at the other way. If we're talking the legal concept of it, the official concept. Now, a lot of things went on, for the success of this so-called indigeneity concept in Nepal. There were leaders who participated, in different conferences organized by the UN. They went in those, conferences conducted by the ILO, plus other like the Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact, and a kind of network building we could see, which ultimately led to the success of the mobilization. Now, what has been the impact of the mobilization? As I told you, Nepal is the only country till now which has ratified the convention. Yes, well, the success has been massive. The success has been massive. They are, they have got reservations on the basis of this indigenous concept. They have got certain access to land rights. They have demanded even for autonomy on the basis of their indigenous identity. Well, discussions are going on. Discussions are going on for the, I can say for the, I'm to say for the settling of indigenous provinces. I'm to say provinces where a particular indigenous community would be in a way controlling certain resources like water, land, forest, all the sort of things. Now, the success of the indigenous mobilization in Nepal it could be an example for other countries. Let's say in South Asia, not in Asia. Let's say in South Asia, whereby countries like India, Bangladesh, they have ratified ILO Convention, 107, the earlier one, which has abstained from or signing the ILO Convention, ratifying the ILO Convention 169. For example, now, well, it is not interested. Like saying in India, no one is indigenous. Like we are all indigenous. That's a government position now, which I'm saying. Be it in Bangladesh or be it in India. But looking at like the success, it's an example. It could be an example for other groups fighting for those rights in different parts of the world. Their ways of their methods of mobilization, how they have used the platforms, the UN platforms, the international forums, plus how they attracted the funds from the international donors for their mobilization, and that would be a lesson in a kind of for other indigenous groups who are playing the indigenous to imitate. And the success was massive.
Sir, please conclude. Please conclude.
Yeah. So my conclusion, I want to conclude is see, as I'm mentioning you, we are talking about indigeneity. All are talking about indigenous, but it is on self-identification. But hardly any country, again, we should not be taking the government position, but hardly any country accepts this word. The word Adivasi, for example, in India, does it exist in what sense in the legal document? Does it exist in the constitution? We never think that. But yes, a country, for example, Nepal, they have put it in the constitution. So that's what I was mentioning. How success how an indigenous mobilization succeeds in another country and how it fails in another country. For example, where the government does not, give a hit to their demands. My paper was on that. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, sir, for completing, just presenting your paper within time frame. And just I would like to say that the crux of your paper is the country, means our country, Nepal, is committed to protect the rights of its indigenous nationalities. I came to know, and one thing I would like to tell you, undoubtedly it was a very well researched and insightful paper. Thanks for presenting it. Now, is there any question or suggestion for Abhijit, sir? Is there any question or suggestion? I would like to check.
Yeah, I would like to have a small comment on Mr. Abhijit Dihidar. It was an oral narrative, not even narrative, sort of like you just gave some insights of what you're doing right now. But I hope you must be knowing about the idea of scheduled tribes, the concept, the constitutional right given to scheduled tribes in the 5th and 6th schedule. And it is not just about indigenous being ratified as a wholesome terminology, not only in India, but also by China. So saying that who is indigenous and who is not only a contested debate only in Asia, but it is also a contested debate in Americas as well. So I think some of your conclusions are premature to claim that whatever is happening in name of indigenous is all success, because the whole debate of indigenous itself has its imperial undertones. So when you're talking about that all foreign fundings is coming and we are becoming empowering indigenous, it has its own ulterior motives, because no foreign funding will come without its own profit-seeking advances. So when we talk about being indigenous and being a superpower or proclaiming our rights with the foreign fundings, first thing we have to understand that nothing happens with outside support to be claiming to be self-reliant. The idea of indigenous has to be a self-reliance from its own rootedness. So when we are talking about indigenous and all these issues, there are lots of contested issues, and to a certain extent, if Asian communities or Asian nations have not accepted this terminology is incomplete. In itself, it is a righteous notion as well. There are certain autonomous rights which are given by all the communities who have not been dispossessed for a long centuries, for a minimum for the 2 to 3 centuries in entire Asian countries, have their autonomous rights. Whether it's India, whether it's China, you must be well aware that there are more than 5 regions in China which are autonomous. Similarly, in India also, all the territories which come under 5th and 6th schedule are autonomous. Of course, there are certain pressures right now going on, which are going to compromise, which may compromise. It yet not been compromised, which may get compromised if the 5th and 6th schedule gets compromised. But it will be only of those communities which are not being dispossessed with their land rights and forest rights for a very long time. But what about the dispossessed communities? What you will call the Mongols which are living in different parts of the world, different Mongol tribes? And not only in India, but they also have their certain lineage in the Nepal as well. So, when we talk about indigeneity, we cannot just go and follow the UN proclaimed imperial connotations and narratives. These are the narratives which have been defined by the imperial rulers to state that you are indigenous and you are not. Where is the say of the autonomous people from the people of the land itself? It's they who are defining us, that who are indigenous and who is not we, or not the people themselves. And when we talk about indigenous, it's not just about those who are living in one land itself. What do you call about the nomadic communities? There are several. The whole Asian, African, and American itself, continent, was governed by, in a major level, historically proven by several nomadic communities. How will you state them? They never possessed any particular land on their part because they were always on a move. So will you not define them as indigenous? What will be their status as an indigenous? And this is not just happening in this part of the world. This is happening in Asian continent itself. There are many communities which transgress the territorial rights between Nepal, Kashmir, and India. Because whatever political boundaries we see today in the South Asian or Asian context, these are not the defining defining territories which are traditionally part of the societies of Asian continent. So these are certain issues which I just wanted to, because you were just giving all your assumptions with all the imperial connotation. So I felt that we can have a discussion on that, maybe at some other platform. Thank you, Mr. Abhijit. It was good to listen to you. Thanks a lot.
My response
Thanks, ma'am, for your beautiful suggestion. Thanks, ma'am, for your beautiful suggestion. Yeah, you suggest.
Hello? Can I respond?
Yeah, Vijay. Yeah.
See, well, I just wanted to make it simple. Like, let's not concentrating on what is going on in Central America or Latin America. Well, I have done a PhD on Nepal, indigenous people, 4 years back. And I just wanted to make it simple when people understand. So now when we are contesting, the word tribe, now how do you see the word tribe? Let us forget what it is. How do you see the word tribe, the legal of the concept, So for example, if we are contesting, the way, now for example, when I was working, I had a problem with a lot of people. They said, like, change the topic. There are no indigenous people in India. There are no indigenous people in Nepal. They are not even willing, to accept that indigenous people exist in Asia. And now, okay, that is the argument which we begin with. You're talking about, now who is indigenous? The first question which I learn is who is indigenous, and see the word, the word they're using is, it doesn't matter who is indigenous, who is not. There is a word which the ILO Convention 169 uses, marginalization and non-dominant, They're fighting for their rights. We are not looking at who came first or who came later. We are not looking at this now. When we are applying it to Africa or to Asia, we are not looking at who came first now. There are two terms associated with it. The first is there should be non-dominant, right? And there should be, in a way, marginalized. So when they're asking for certain rights, how do they get these rights? Now, I am from a 6th schedule area. I am from, Assam, looking what is going on. So that's what I'm saying. I'm concluding. My conclusion.
All right, Abhijit, it's okay. It's a very, you just finished your PhD, so I could understand lots of conflicts and ideas within your mind. It's all right.
Yes.
The things evolve. Even I did my PhD 20 years ago, so I have my own. So things keep on changing, not to worry about it. Take care.
Dr. Abhijit, sorry for interruption. We will discuss it later on, but due to the lack of time, now I would like to invite Dr. Priya ma'am. Dr. Priya ma'am.
Thanks.
Dr. Priya ma'am. I think she has not joined. Dr. Priya ma'am. I think that she has not joined now. I would like to just call Dr. Ankita.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Dr. Ankita. Am I audible?
Yeah, ma'am. Yeah, ma'am. Yeah, ma'am. You are audible.
Yeah, very good afternoon to all of you. And, I am really enjoying this session, as I have also done my PhD on the Indigenous Australians, and the Australian Aboriginal drama was the gamut of study of my research. And, from the papers that I've just heard, it is really a kind of a revision of everything that I've done in my PhD. I completed like 3 years back. So really congratulations to all the organization or the organizers, and thank you so much, Regan sir, Shubhra ma'am, for giving us the opportunity to meet and to speak on a platform of international relevance. So can I present my PPT?
Yeah, ma'am. You can carry on.
Okay. Just a second. Yeah, is the presentation visible?
Yeah, ma'am. It's visible.
Yeah, thank you, sir. The topic of my paper is Surviving Through Laughter, Significance of Humor in Australian Aboriginal Drama. This is the title of my paper, and this is the map of the, this is a flag of the Aboriginal people that I'm using for the slide. And, the one thing that I really, really enjoyed while doing my PhD on Indigenous people, on Aborigines, was the humor. The way they kind of, write is, the humor, the element of humor and irony and sarcasm and wit and repartees. This is significantly and pertinently used in their work, specifically in the genre of drama, which was the area of study of my research also, and for today's paper also. And how through the use of humor, they are giving the message that we are a race, that we are here to stay. We are not a dying race. No matter that you kind of, as Stanner puts it, you put us on the you put us, or you make us the melancholic footnote of your histories, or but we are the intellectual aristocrats, as Levi Strauss calls them, the Aboriginals of Australia. She calls them as the aristocratic intellectual aristocrats. So humor has been beautifully used in their works, and that is one mode of survival for them. They don't want their writings to be just read as a kind of a trauma writing. They want their writings to be appreciated for the extra linguistic features as well, and humor, how significant that is contextually and linguistically in their works. That is what I have tried to dwell upon in my paper. So all of us are aware that the Aboriginals, Australian Aboriginals, they are the original inhabitants. They lived 40,000 years before the arrival of British. In 1788, it is in 1770 when James Cook came to the island, and he declared it under the George III. But the official colonization began with Philip Arthur in 1788, and how they are reduced from being the original inhabitants to a minority group now. So how this pyramid has been inverted. The original inhabitants have been reduced to a minority status. And of course, their literature can be categorized as a fourth world literature, and I have just given reference of some of the prominent works. If somebody wants to, read more about fourth world literature, how Mudruru Narugan, one of the, the acclaimed critic writing on Aboriginal people, he, in one of his articles, White Forms Aboriginal Content, calls Aboriginal literature as a literature of the fourth world. The notion of a fourth world of minority Indigenous people encompassed within modern nation states was popularized by native leaders, especially George Manuel, former president of the National Brotherhood of Canada. To promote the perspective of the fourth world, with the assistance of Michael Porcelains, he published The Fourth World, An Indian Reality in the year 1974. Noel Dick, in his book Indigenous People and the Nation State, says that Aboriginal population is struggling variously to retain traditional land, to cope with government administration of their affairs, and to survive as culturally distinct people within nation states. These people are politically weak, economically, marginally, and culturally stigmatized members of the national societies that have overtaken them and their lands. How the original inhabitants were declared as terra nullius. Terra nullius is a term which was used for Aboriginal people, which means that they have no land rights. They don't own any kind of a land. So they were the original inhabitants of that particular continent, and how they were significantly reduced to being called as terra nullius. This is what categorizes them as marginalized group of people. Unlike other ethnic minorities, fourth world people are not immigrants, and this is one point which has to be kept in mind when we are studying Indigenous people, that they are not immigrants, but the original inhabitants of the lands that today form the territories of nation states. Unlike the people of the third world, who can at least hope to take control of their countries one day through strength of numbers, the tiny internal colonies that make up the fourth world are fated always to be minority population in their own land. So they are a minority population in their own land. The aim of my paper is to study the race relations as expounded in The No Sugar and the Dreamers, written by Aboriginal playwright Jack Davis. studying the coexistence of Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians to create at least awareness against the many injustices, acknowledging the achievements of Aboriginal playwrights and in particular Jack Davis, and fostering the Aboriginal rights movement in Australia, exploring the issues of identity, isolation and misrepresentation of Aborigines as a peripheral race, study of the Indigenous resistance against this cultural hegemony, incorporation of and examining how the rather traditional Western genre has been adjusted by the Indigenous playwrights to incorporate Aboriginal beliefs and customs, as ma'am was just rightly pointing out, that the history that has been written about them is a very Eurocentric approach. It's a very Eurocentric, they have been historicized in a very Eurocentric approach. There has been, very little of history which has come up from the Indigenous writers themselves. And if we are studying Australian literature, these writers through their creative work only are writing and reconstituting history. So as such, the history about Aboriginal people was either written by non-Aborigines, or they were kind of distorted histories. So they are reconstructing their histories through their literary works. So rejoicing survival. So they are kind of, with the use of humor in their work, they are rejoicing the survival, that we are a race which cannot be exterminated. And Jack Davis, he interweaves the recorded historical text and fictive depiction of Indigenous life, posing some doubts and questions towards the discrepancy in history. So through his dramas, he is pointing out those discrepancies or fault points in the history, how they are misrepresented in history. He interplays between Western theatrical dramatic tradition and Indigenous performance, which forms a post-colonial culture. Very significant. So, this recombinative process has been called as theatrical syncretism by Christopher Balmy. And what is theatrical syncretism? Is an amalgamation of Western traditional forms and also the indigenous elements into their drama. So it's a kind of an amalgamation of indigeneity and Western dramatic tradition, and then it how this kind of a amalgamation forms a kind of a very strong opposition which is subversive, as Homi Bhabha says, and then they kind of highlight the fault points of the colonial power. And I've just, given some of the quotes from Homi Bhabha and Brian Dibble and other critics. Should I have? I don't think so. I have to read all of this, because if anybody is doing research, they will understand, the concept of hybridity and how hybridity plays the, how contradictory meanings are generated out of a text. So, and how this hybridity constructs, and how through this hybridized kind of a contestation, they construct their own subjectivity and solidarity, and how this disables the oppressor by disgusting the deviance as compliance. So, as Homi Bhabha says, that colonial presence is always ambivalent, and this gap is a failure of colonial discourse and a site of resistance. The plays by Jack Davis that I've taken up for my study in the paper, they extensively exploit these fault lines and gaps in Australian colonizing discourse, contextually also and textually also. If we study textually, how culturally he has dealt with these fault points, how generically, and how linguistically, and contextually through the premiere of the plays, like he wrote in around the time of 1988, when bicentennial celebration of Australian continent was going on. So they were celebrating 200 years of establishing Australia, and on the other hand, the Aborigines were talking about how their land was, how they were, that pyramid that I showed in the first slide, how that was reversed, how they were made from the original inhabitants to be called as Terra Nullias. So the context, the premiere of the plays also becomes very, very important. The text of resistance voice a strong urge to survive despite all the atrocities hurled upon them. Nyonga's spirit will survive. They are not a dying race. This is the message that the plays, through the plays of Jack Davis, this is the message that he is trying to give, that Dyonga is an indigenous word. So he says that the spirit is going to survive. We are not a dying race. And he employs humor. And these are the various, how the paradigm, this again, the pyramid is shifted by the Aboriginal dramatists like Jack Davis, how he breaks these stereotypes by the incorporation of various, that theatrical syncretism that I was talking about, to an amalgamation of Western traditions and amalgamation and the indigenous concept of like the circular structure. Then he incorporates the circular structure, kind of breaks the linear pattern of time as seen in Western drama. So they say that the structure in most of the plays is circular in the sense that they believe that in the Dreamtime stories, in the spirit, in something.
Ma'am, please conclude. Ma'am,
Yeah.
please conclude.
Yeah. So these are certain elements that he has used in his drama, like the circular structure, the Dreamtime stories, use of space, use of lighting, use of sign language, dance, Nyonga dialogues, the indigenous dialogues that he has used. He has deviated from the standard English language in his dramas. He has written, when you read the works, there are so many Nyonga words, the vocabulary, the indigenous words that I used. And while I was doing my research, I had to go back to glossary. So that's a kind of a displacement that gives you a sense of displacement, how these people were displaced from their land. Because as a non-native reader of their text, you will not be able to understand them unless and until you go to the glossary. So it's like an exhaustive, practice of reading and again consulting the glossary. So he gives you an overall experience of displacement, and how humor, irony, how dance, how sign language, how Dreamtime stories, all these issues are very, very significant in understanding original dramatists, and how through the employment of all these things, they kind of point out at the fault points of the colonial discourse. And the message of all the Aboriginal writers is of coming together, is of unification, of recognizing and appreciating differences, of forging a national identity, that is of reconciling of the cultures. These are certain conclusions of the paper. The plays, they unravel the structures of subordination. They follow a clear political goal and have propelled and ignited the resilience movement in Australia. They want to say that we are much more than just being a trauma writing. They empower the marginalized by bringing forth their malady. They regard novelty and reverse the Eurocentric discourse by letting the silenced speak. Help determine a more harmonious intercultural future in Australia. They shift the literary focus from the believed center. See, the term is believed center towards the margin. It is just a believed center. It's not that it is the center. And through all these linguistic and extra linguistic modes, they reverse the power structures in order to relocate the sightlines. Sightlines is the angle that is formed between a spectator and an actor on a stage. So their plays are kind of relocating the sightlines. They are giving you a new way of looking, a new perspective into looking at the marginalized group. Okay, I'll just shift this. This is a very, very powerful. You all must have also read this quote somewhere about racism. I find it very, very interesting, by Robert Mugabe, the Zimbabwean president. He says that racism will never end as long as white cars are still using black tires. Racism will never end if people still use black to symbolize bad luck and white for peace. Racism will never end if people still wear white clothes to weddings and black clothes to funerals. Racism will never end as long as those who don't pay their bills are blacklisted, not whitelisted. Even when playing snooker, you haven't won until you've sunk the black ball, and the white ball much remain on the table. But I don't care, he says. I don't care. The list is so long. I don't care as long as I'm still using the white toilet paper to wipe my black butt. So this is a kind of, the black humor which is prevalent in the plays by Jack Davis and other Aboriginal writers also. While I was doing my research and I was giving I used to read their plays, there were a lot of debate about the vulgar language, but that vulgar language is not actually vulgar to them. It's a kind of a humor. It's black humor that's how they have presented the pitfalls of Aboriginal people as well as the good things that are there in their culture. So they're not ashamed of anything that is Aboriginal, anything that is indigenous, or anything that is true to themselves. This is what.
Ma'am, please conclude. Please conclude, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Ma'am, undoubtedly it was a nice presentation, and I would like to say it seemed that we were in classroom and our noble professors were delivering a beautiful lecture. Undoubtedly it was a very nice presentation. It was a very nice presentation. Yeah. Now it's the last call for Dr. Priya ma'am. If Dr. Priya ma'am has joined, has she joined or not, Dr. Priya ma'am? I think she is not here. She is not with us. Now, in this technical session, we had 5 speakers. 4 were present. Lee Chen ma'am, Dr. Prasenjit ji, Dr. Abhijit ji, Dr. Ankita ma'am. The paper very beautifully. Now, in remark, I would like to say. Lee Chen ma'am is a researcher and writer for environmental conservation and community development NGOs in Perth, Western Australia. The title of her paper was Where Land and Water Meet, a cultural exploration of Australian Aboriginal livelihood in response to environmental changes. She has presented very beautifully the Aboriginal Australian livelihoods, especially in agriculture and aquaculture, in relation to traditional cosmologies, and she has also explored or highlighted the effect of environmental changes, particularly devastating droughts. Recently, what the Aboriginal people of Australia faced: droughts, bushfires, floods, and the industrialization, such a thing. And what happened? They ultimately the loss of wild habits in Australia. These things just I found in her paper, and. The second speaker was Dr. Prasenjit Panda sir, an assistant professor, Department of English and Foreign Languages, Guru Ghasidham Vishwavidyalaya. The title of his paper is Indigenous in Identity, Oral Tradition and the Land in Poetry of Parimal Hansa. Undoubtedly, he has presented a very beautiful paper, and even I just leave a comment. It seems that you have lived that life. The problems of means tribal community which you raise, in what way you have presented. It seems that you have passed the life, you have lived, you have seen it, and what the problem they have faced, you presented it on the ground of reality. And the third speaker was Dr. Abhijit Dihidar, assistant professor, Goreswar College, Assam. And the title of his paper is Indigeneity in South Asia, a case of the indigenous nationalities mobilization in Nepal. He has also presented a very beautiful paper, and just the crux of his paper was Nepal is committed to protect the rights of its indigenous nationalities, and he also presented the impact of the mobilization. And the last speaker, the last speaker was Dr. Ankita Gupta ma'am, head GGDSB College, Punjab, and the title of her paper is Surviving Through Laughter: Significance of Humor in Australian Aboriginal Drama. And taking the play of Jack Davies' play No Sugar, The Dreamers, she has presented a very beautiful paper, and it was a very marvelous presentation, because already I said it seemed that we were in classroom and our professor is delivering lecture, so such a thing I found. And undoubtedly we also find especially the problem of the survival of Aboriginal people against the onslaught of colonial forces, such a thing we find in her beautiful paper. So thanks Ma'am, Shubhra ma'am, thanks Dr. Regin sir for inviting me and to chair this session, and thanks all the participants and those who presented their well-researched, well-structured paper. I welcome them from the core of my heart. Over to ma'am.